Welcome to episode 7 of The Leap Home, The Colour of Truth.
In this week's episode, Sam arrives in 1955 in the body of a black chauffeur and experiences the racial prejudice that was prevalent at the time. When he's arrested for flouting segregation laws, it seems he may fail in his efforts to keep his elderly employer alive. But can Al step in to save the day, or is that scientifically impossible?
Do it, Gussie, damn it, or I'll smash your brains off!
Good evening, Ian, how are we?
I'm okay, Gerry, how are you?
In brain smashing mood.
Yeah, that's good. I'm very pleased, having watched this episode, that we solved racism so that these sorts of things don't happen anymore.
Yeah.
It's like we live in this post-racial world, it's quite pleasant.
Yeah.
Did you get any vibes of other movies or shows when you were watching this?
Of course. I'm sure you've got some interesting trivia about that.
Nope.
No? Driving Miss Daisy?
Well, I was going to ask. Driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah,
but he's not quite as much just a driver, is he? He's more of a...
Yeah, but what's your trivia? You must have trivia about that.
In terms of how similar it is?
Yeah.
No, it's similar.
That's the trivia. No, that's not the trivia. The trivia is that it wasn't ripping off or it wasn't influenced by the movie.
Yeah, they're just similar.
No, it was based in a book.
Oh, I'm sure they get sued by the author.
No, I'm sure they got the rights to it. So this isn't influenced by the movie, this is influenced by the same book that the movie was based on.
But not The Colour of Money.
No, that's an entirely different movie. Tom Cruise is quite able to buy a sandwich at a bar. Although, Paul Newman does beat a black man to death with a pool cue in one scene. That
was back in the pre-racism world.
Yeah. We shouldn't say that anyway, because Paul Newman is actually a really cool guy. Or was a really cool guy.
Okay.
We shouldn't make light of racism, really, should we?
No, I don't think we were. Were we?
We're making light of
the idea that there's no racism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Paul Newman apparently being a massive racist. Well, which he wasn't.
I'm sure he wasn't. Mark Wahlberg is.
Yeah, well, he's got history previous. I'm hoping that he has learned the error of his ways, and I'm sure I've heard him
repent, yeah. I'm not sure that's good enough, as some would say.
Well,
before we get into this episode, we've got a few of the usual promos to go through. People can find us on social media if they want to discuss racism. We're at Leap Home Podcast? Leap Home Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. We're at The Leap Home on Facebook, and theleaphome.com is our website. Of course, you can find every episode as usual 1 week early on our YouTube channel, Columbo Podcast Productions.
And there's a little Easter egg on the Snapchat this week, I believe.
Always. You win a lot of money if you find it. Oof. In terms of reviews, it's very helpful to us if you could review the podcast, preferably on Apple Podcasts, but really on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. Also, go along and smash all the YouTube buttons that you can find to help us out there as well.
Not all of them. Don't smash the dislike button, that wouldn't be good.
No, well, we don't record those stats anyway, but yeah, prefer
we ignore those ones.
Yeah, likes,
confirmation
and subscribes,
bias,
and ring-a-ding bells, wherever they are. All those buttons that we don't understand. Right, shall we get on with it?
Let's crack on.
Patty's Cafe. Well, I should say, we've got credits as usual, and then Sam gives a spiel about how he's starting to enjoy leaping and recaps his achievements so far.
Yeah.
And then he arrives in 1955. It's not quite the same as the end of last week's episode.
I was going to say that. In last week's episode, he leaps into the seat. This time he leaps to the door and walks over to the seat at the counter in Patty's Cafe.
Which makes quite a significant difference.
In what way?
In that it's Sam who's committing the offensive act rather than it having already happened.
Yeah, we should say offensive
to the racists around there, yes.
Yeah. That's a good point. I hadn't considered that. Yes, because this isn't Jesse, who is the character, the person he leaps into.
No.
So this isn't his decision, this is Sam's decision. Yeah, we don't know right now if Jesse had any intention whatsoever. He might have just went over, picked up the sandwich and left.
He probably would have, because Sam only sits because he's hungry.
This, again, we labour this point that I certainly do. The actions of Sam here, and then he leaves, that's going to cause Jesse all... I mean, the intentions are fabulous, of course, but you need to be practical as well. You're leaving a person in this environment to fend for himself after poking the... It's not as if he's got a team of... He's an elderly man. He doesn't necessarily have the the ability to fend for himself against all these bigots and racists.
No, Sam doesn't always think things through, the consequences of his actions.
No, but in fairness, that at this point he doesn't know he is.
He just thinks he's a guy in a cafe wanting a sandwich.
Sure.
However,
he sits down, and that causes quite the scandal.
Consternation.
Yeah, amongst all the white patrons who, it's a sort of record scratch, they all stop and look to see what this chap's doing.
He says there's got to be some mistake when he sees his reflection before a couple of angry young men displaying the kind of racial anger you still find these days.
Yeah, what they call incels and proud boys and
all that sort of thing. Yeah. People who want to be able to be openly racist, they wish times could go back to the 60s.
Yeah.
Anyhow, they haul him out of his seat, tell him it's the biggest mistake he'll make. However, nothing happens because the woman running the diner is able to quell this.
Yeah. Just let's clarify, I don't know if I mentioned it, Sam is now in the body of Jesse, who's an elderly black man.
I wouldn't say he's elderly.
Well,
he lives for another 50 years.
We find that out,
so he's
yes.
Really only in his 50s, he just looks elderly.
He's got the Morgan Freeman look. Morgan Freeman always looks old.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah. I mean, Shawshank was the best part of 30 years, 35 years ago?
Yeah.
And in my mind, he was an old man back then.
Yes. Well, he was playing an old man. Yeah, he'd been in prison for 40 years or something. Yeah. Anyway. So like I say, nothing happens because Peggy, I presume, who runs the diner... Patty, sorry. Yeah. Comes over with Ms. Melanie's lunch and Sam takes it and goes.
Yeah, at first I'm thinking, is she there to try and... is she standing up for justice and trying to save Jesse? But I don't think she... I think she is of the same opinion as everyone else.
She just doesn't want this in her diner, yeah. So,
Sam, he backs up and stumbles onto the street where a title card shows us it's when?
1955.
What date? Why do you not... It tells you on the screen, Ian.
Why would
you not take... Well, no, you should care, because a lot of these times the date is significant. It's very a specific date.
Oh, you'll have written it down if it's significant.
8th of August, 1955. From now on, get the date written down. It's presented to you. There's absolutely no reason
I've already
not
told
to do
everyone
this.
It's 1955.
No, I want to know the date. The 8th of August may be significant. If it's a date of an assassination, for example, you go, that's that date that happened.
That's exciting.
Anyway, I should say that some idiot broke the water cooler where we are, and it's very warm, certainly for us. I'm therefore on my something like my 4th can of Monster energy drink, and
that's why you're so hyper.
That's why I'm so hyper, I think. Yeah,
and over agitated.
I'm a bit agitated, yeah.
Possibly because I've got my massive bottle of water here.
Yeah. Anyway,
so Sam's not sure where he is, but we know he's in Alabama, or at least he figures he's somewhere in the south.
Yeah, he looks around, obviously amazed that he is in the Back to the Future set.
Indeed.
And dabs at the sweat on his face as he takes in small town USA in the 50s.
This Ms. Melanie, whose lunch he's collected, shouts him across the road and chastises him for leaving her standing outside, and then again for leaving her car unlocked, and finally for not knowing where he's going. Yeah,
I've wrote an old bat here. This episode, you sway between thinking she's just as bad as the rest, to, oh, maybe she's seeing sense and isn't that bad, but which I think is a fair way of presenting this character. But too easy for her just to simply be,
good or bad,
or bad and then become good as it goes along. Yeah. The swings are a nice touch because it reflects how in real life no one just simply changes opinion.
No, and I think she's obviously affected by the social circumstances. She has certain beliefs, but she also has a personal relationship with this character, Jesse, who she cares about.
Sure. And I think, just going back there, I think that you can look at Miss Melanie and her opinions to be a microcosm of society at large. Again, society doesn't shift just in one go. You go back and forth, and it takes a fair amount of time before the majority of people, come to a consensus and their general views and opinions change for the better.
In this car, anyway, we hear a voiceover from Sam, which is quite weird, talking about how comfortable he feels as Jesse, even though he shouldn't feel comfortable for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is sort of overcompensating by the writers. It's like, I'm a black man, but I love it. Don't worry.
It's fine. It's fine with me, honestly.
Yeah, there's no problem here. Yeah.
Melanie, again, chastises him for leaving his indicator on too long and running the car battery down.
Yeah, she's got this, showing you here that she's maybe a bit of a curmudgeon.
Yes. Likes to be right, or likes to be seen to be
Yep, and she's in a position of authority and power.
Yeah.
She isn't embarrassed. She's not quiet. She's not quiet. She's used to dishing out orders and getting her own way.
Indeed. They arrive at the cemetery and Ms. Melanie is upset.
Wait a second. We didn't even know we were going to the cemetery.
Well, that's right.
We should discuss the fact that Sam, he sits in the car and obviously has no idea where he's going.
Well, I said that earlier on. She chastises him for not knowing where he's going. So he has to kind of figure it out piece by piece. Yeah, he gives this whole act about having hit his head and not really remembering anything, and she tells him, we're going to the same place we go every Saturday. Every Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Take a left and whatever else.
So, yeah, she's quite exasperated, but gives directions.
And they end up at the cemetery, where she's upset to see weeds having grown over her husband's grave.
Whoa. You're jumping ahead yourself again there, Ian. Come on.
You want to go over every line?
No, I want to go over the fact that they crossed a rail track, which is very significant.
That was significant later.
Yeah, but that's foreshadowing just now.
She also wants him to be very careful when he's doing it so as not to damage her tyres.
Yeah, the weeds. She is upset that they have not kept the weeds away and gets down on her hands and knees to tidy up before Sam stops her and sets about it himself as we find out more about both of them.
There you go. Oh, and I see you. You got your gloves all dirty.
I get so flustered knowing he's not being taken care of. We always took such good care of each other. In 50 years, that man never let a bad thing happen. Well, we lost Bo, but that wasn't his fault. As Charles said, the good Lord needed that boy to come home.
It's hard losing somebody you love.
I guess you know as much about that as I do. Your Sally lost 4, didn't she?
Yeah, I guess we did.
Charles always thought highly of your Sally. When she passed, I remember him telling me there wasn't a finer Negro woman in all of Alabama.
I'm just gonna throw these in the trash.
Couple of things.
Yeah.
So, first of all, it was interesting that her first instinct was to remove these weeds herself.
I think it shows how much she still thinks and cares, and how much Charles is.
And she's not hardwired to make Jesse do everything.
No.
Secondly, how if they come every Saturday?
It's only been a week.
It's not. Surely the weeds can't be that bad, yeah.
Nah.
Anyway, and it's also a bit of a weird conversation to just say, "Oh yeah, remember when your kids all died?"
Yeah. And then obviously the use of her terminology. It's
well, it implies that maybe Charles was up to no good with this woman.
I'm talking about
Jesse's wife.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
But it was never spoken about.
Never spoken about. No, that's part and part. If you had staff, if you had servants, then you were allowed to do that.
Were you?
It's part of the job description. It was implied.
Was it?
But it shouldn't be. But it probably was. You could just touch and manhandle.
Even that late. That's quite interesting.
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Anyhow, as Sam heads off with these weeds, he is stopped.
Yes, by Al, who appears wearing a fetching lilac get-up and a very interesting shirt, clipsy around where the tie would be.
Yeah.
He's wearing this, I think it's got a little like a person on it.
That's what we wear in the future.
Yeah.
We get to hear Sam's own brand of racism here for a man who thinks he's not racist.
This stood out for me quite dramatically, or quite, it was...
He's astonished, we should say, that he has been able to leap into a black person, as if there's some kind of reason he wouldn't be.
Yeah, he says that if he can leap into a black man, the possibilities are endless, which he finds fascinating. Why? This isn't a different species, it's not a different...
There's no genetic difference at all.
Exactly, he's not leapt into a hamster or a tree.
Which colours of skin did he think he could jump into? Just the whitest of whites? What about people with Mediterranean tones? I really have... And Sam, more than anyone on the planet, must understand the technology around this, the whole leaping thing. Yeah, the whole thing, it just exposes Sam's personal racism, sort of middle class racism, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an activist. I think people should have equal rights, but they're different from me.
No, but I think that's fine in the sense that everyone thinks they're not racist, but everyone has got their own prejudices, and I think I think this is shown that even someone who wouldn't consider it, his natural reaction is just like, oh, I'm a black guy. This is
So different.
Yeah.
And then we get a really inappropriate joke from Al about afro hair.
Firstly, Al says he finds it more dangerous than fascinating where he's leapt into it at this point, before making a crack about Sam's curly hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good, that, is it?
That's not right.
No.
By the year that Al's in, he should be, especially given what we hear about Al and his background, he should be known better than to make comments like that, even if it's what's on his mind, even if he thinks it's a really witty remark in the moment.
Yeah.
Anyway, he informs Sam that Ziggy reckons he's here to save Ms. Melanie, who is, in the original history, squished by a train.
Yeah, the next day at 5:18, Ziggy apparently is 76% sure that he has to save Scarlett O'Hara. I think does Sam asks about Jesse?
Yes, but Ziggy's not really looked into Jesse yet.
No, it's not that. It's got no records. So if you were a black person back then, you would not necessarily, records wouldn't be kept about you. Wouldn't have been deemed worthy to have records necessarily.
Yeah. Al then makes a comment about having a lot of black friends, which upsets Sam. So again, double standards from Sam here. He's not recognised his own prejudice, but you can see the problem with what Al said.
Yeah, sure. And he mentions that the first civil rights protest started right there in Red Dog. So we're at the sort of inception of the civil rights movement, apparently.
Indeed. And Al says he was here at the time and involved, which is obviously meant to be a twist.
Yeah, a couple of things we can maybe get to. He mentions Authrey Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
I looked into that, but I don't think it's a real person.
No, I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, not only that, but he was involved. Did you mention in marches and demonstrations?
Yeah, he says,
yeah. An eager Sam suggests that perhaps this is what he is there for, rather than just saving Ms. Melanie. I'm only calling her Melanie from the rest of the episode. I don't call her Ms. Melanie.
Okay.
But Al disagrees, and his point is made when they hear the sound of the train in the distance. The sound was exactly the same as the Back to the Future 3 train, and I looked at it and I brought up an image as well of the train from that movie. I think they may have been the same train they used.
It's possible.
It would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That if they had it for the 1989 Back to the Future Part 3 Universal, they'd probably use it again. They wouldn't ditch it and buy a new train.
No, well, why would you?
Yeah. Oh, I suppose you probably don't own them. I'd imagine they just hire them in whenever they need them.
Or record a lot of stock footage and hope you've got what you need.
I'm not sure stock footage would work when it's decked up to be a time travelling train.
Well, that's a bit different, yeah.
Okay. We get a close-up of this machine powering towards them, and then we head to Melanie's home, where they arrive back at the sort of large plantation-style place to find a chap called Clayton waiting for them, and he wants to talk to Sam in private. So they head through to the kitchen. I
think Sam's quite pleased about that because he doesn't seem to know where the kitchen is initially.
Yeah.
And he's kind of turning in circles in the entrance area.
Clayton is not happy. What's his problem?
Okay, I think we can say safely that he is Melanie's son.
Yes.
And he thinks that what Sam has done in the town has caused him maybe embarrassment, certainly outrage.
Oh, it was outrageous, yes.
That he should certainly not be doing it anymore, and basically asks him some inappropriate questions about who he's got staying with him.
Yeah, an uppity northern N-word.
Yeah.
So obviously if you're from the north, you're more liberal.
Well, you've got more rights and
yes,
so on.
Yes. You'd be quite subversive. You probably wouldn't, if you were a white racist, you wouldn't want your black servants to be having their minds, their brains, their heads turned by ideas, more radical ideas.
Yeah, it's not that they can go on Twitter or Reddit and get these ideas in other ways.
Yeah, you have to be told about. Do you know what happened?
Pamphlets
up there. We can do. We can drink and eat anywhere.
Yeah. Sam looks a bit offended at this question. Says he doesn't believe so, but he sat down at the bar because he was hungry, and Clayton tells him not to get that hungry again.
And at this point, I quite liked it. Sam, he moves towards him sharply, and Clayton shows himself to be a coward by taking a step back and thinking he's about to be struck before he scurries off.
Yeah, which is interesting because obviously Jesse's much older than Clayton.
Yeah, Clayton's just a coward.
Yeah.
In the living area, we, as you rightly say, discover Clayton is Melanie's son, and he wants to talk to her about the incident, but she cuts him off and states that she doesn't care what Sam did in the cafe. So again, you think at this point, okay, she's not as bad as what you'd originally thought. He tries to reason with her by reminding her she's a widow of who?
The governor.
Former governor, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause he's dead.
Exactly. So she's not a widow. Yeah, she's the widow of the... Okay.
Yes, and when her N-word starts acting uppity, people take notice.
Dearie me.
And she needs to know what to do if he acts out of line again.
She turns swiftly and sharply tells him she doesn't need to be reminded of her responsibilities, and she ignores this question. He leaves, and then Melanie stands in apparent pain and shouts on Sam whilst holding her head.
Yes, he comes through and helps her to sit down, and she says she's okay, and Sam once again forgets who he is and starts trying to be a doctor.
Yeah, he tries to examine her and touch her, which makes her revert to instinct and tells him to keep his coloured voodoo to himself and go and get her a drink. I mean, really, you think when you're thinking, okay, I can understand that you are a product of your environment, but she's shown here how she spoke to Clayton that she's not one of them until she says this,
and she knows that he's presumably in a church of some other religion, not a voodoo practicing.
Yeah, it's just pure racism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but then she also knows he's not medically trained, and why she's trying to do medical examinations.
That's true. Yeah,
so that's maybe Sam's fault a little bit. Not the language, but the fact that she's concerned.
Yeah. So Sam goes to the kitchen, and at this point, a young woman who we learn is, I think, his granddaughter.
Yes,
Nell. She comes to the back door to tell him how proud she is of what he done earlier. Obviously, he's the talk of the town, and she's going to wait for him.
Yes, she asks whether Melanie's going to keep him late, and he says he'll find out when he takes the lemonade through. I think he's still figuring out who she is and what's going on.
Who Melanie is. Okay. Oh, Nell, sorry. Yes. Yeah. So he goes back through to give Melanie her drink, and she asks if that is his Nell there to take him home. So that's quite helpful for him, isn't it?
It is very much so. She said that she had wanted him to look at a leaky faucet, but it's okay for him to do it first thing in the morning. Why mention it then?
I'll tell you why. It's a way of apologising.
Okay.
She realises she was out of order a moment ago, so she said, "You've got to do this, but leave it." So it's a little sort of peace offering.
You don't think it's a case of there's always more work?
No.
You're leaving me in the lurch here?
No, I don't think so. I think it's deliberately as a way of apology.
He then says he is worried about leaving her alone, but she reminds him that Clayton's coming back for supper and not to worry.
So he leaves, but looks back and he's clearly worried for her. I'm not sure why Sam would be so worried
because she seemed unwell, I think, not anything else.
Yeah,
she's holding her head. He's worried that she's got some sort of concussion or illness.
Hemorrhage. Sam finds himself heading home in the car with Nell, who has clearly been enthused and inspired by Sam's subversive actions that day.
Well, what?
Oh, come on, Papa Jesse. I mean, all the white folks was flapping their skinny lips off about you sitting down at Miss Patty's today.
Certainly was the talk of the town.
So, what'd it feel like?
Like sitting down to eat?
It's about time somebody shook up the white folks in this town and remind them what century we're living in. I'm gonna sit at that counter someday, and I'm gonna drink from the white fountain and ride in the front of the bus and do all the things that make white folks mad.
Is that why you want to do it, to make them mad?
Yep. And 'cause it's right.
You always drive so fast?
Now, of course, Daddy'd have a fit if he knew I was going over 35. But I gotta get you home early so you can cook.
Cook?
Papa Jesse, you're going senile on me? You know you promised to cook chitlins for the church picnic.
I'd heard of chitlins, of course. Thought they were one of those rare southern delicacies that taste as good as they sound. I never realized they were pig intestines. The smell was like something that had been kept around too long in autopsy class.
So during that clip, we see two of the rednecks.
Yes, two from the diner.
Yeah, sitting in a truck, watching them go by. I think they might.
I think they might follow them. Yeah.
Yeah. Chitlins. That sounds disgusting. We would never eat anything like that intestines, would we?
Not without stuffing it with oatmeal and mutton and stuff like that first.
Deep frying it.
Yeah. We're now at the family home, I believe.
So are you going to call it a shack this time, Ian? You're always calling these homes shacks?
No, this one's not. Clearly not. This is a home built with love.
Okay.
It's Jesse and his son and his daughter-in-law and the two granddaughters, I think.
Yeah.
They're staying there.
He is doing all he can, Jesse that is, to stop himself from vomiting as he prepares the chitlins. And he isn't the only one who apparently doesn't care for them.
No, everybody else leaves as soon as they finish preparing the vegetables. And he's told that he shouldn't have volunteered if he didn't want to do it. Al, however, shows up and is keen to play his black credentials.
Yeah, he loves chitlins. And we cut to a little later where things seem to be going so well that Al is lamenting his lack of physical form. He wants to be able to smell and taste the dish.
Just as he asks Sam to tell him what it tastes like, they, I suppose, or Sam, is interrupted by his son, Willis.
Yes, he returns and he overhears Sam talk to Al and claims that people will think he is crazy if they find out he's talking to himself.
Sam covers nice enough by saying it just helps him when he's cooking.
Yeah, but the son goes on to suggest that being crazy might explain his actions earlier in the day. And Al can't believe what he hears he did. So Al obviously has no...
He had not been aware of it, you know. I think Willis's main concern is not so much that he doesn't think they should have these rights, but he doesn't want his family put in the line of fire.
Of course, yeah. He's worried about his elderly father.
And the rest of them.
I mean, yeah, we should say that people are getting their houses firebombed, and
yeah, of course.
If you start any of this sort of stuff back then.
And people are getting lynched. Willis solves one problem though by tasting the chitlins and saying they need salt before heading out.
And at this point, Al reminds Sam he promised him he would keep his head down. I mean, Sam leaped there, he didn't.
Yeah, it's before he got a chance to even assess what was going on.
Yeah.
He also tells Sam that if he thinks he can kickstart the civil rights movement, he's out of his league.
Yeah, because I think Sam's quite naively says, well, I've got a right to sit at the counter. I had a right to sit at the counter. And Al said, well, actually, in 1955 down here, you don't have that right.
Yeah.
And Sam is, he's driven, he's got a desire, a passion to put right this wrong. But I think there's a certain amount of ego as well to think that you've just arrived there. Yeah. I'll sort out one person on their own
who's not lived through any of this,
doesn't really know what the situation is or the best. It's not just that, it's like any sort of politics and movement. There has to be strategy and tactic. You have to really understand your enemy. You have to understand the resources you have at your ability, who's good at doing what. And
yeah, you can't just make something happen by wanting it.
No, and even doing your own thing, like one person doing this. I know you've got the whole Rosa Parks thing, but that's actually if you look into that, that was a concerted effort. That was a strategy. Mm-hmm. Rosa Parks wasn't. I think a lot of people think that as well, that she was one individual person who sat on a bus, but it wasn't. It was a concerted campaign as part of the civil rights movement. So I think, yeah, Sam is he's I think he's biting off more than he can handle. I think
he's got a bit of the old white saviour syndrome.
Well, that's one of the notes that I made here. And if we talk actually, about like Back to the Future again, one of the criticisms about that is, you had Martigan back and apparently inventing rock and roll and giving Chuck Berry the ideas. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, here we go. Some white middle class kid has invented.
That's not a valid criticism because he got it from Chuck Berry to begin with.
Yeah, but he's back in time now. Now suddenly the history will change, and if Chuck Berry tells the truth, he says, "Well, where'd you come up with this? All about some white boy gave me it."
Okay. Yeah. Anyhow, just at this point, Sam and Al, hear Nell screaming, and they run outside to see the idiots from the diner lighting a cross on fire in their yard. Yeah.
Before that, just let's mention Ziggy. There's an update from Ziggy. It's now 96% that he's to save Melanie. So I think that's the highest percentage we've had so far. Yeah. Outside, there's this burning cross on the lawn, and the two rednecks in the truck
put hoods on.
Can't even bother putting a big white hood on. They are laughing and they screech off. This again shows you that perhaps they've got some sort of, they've got the perception of power that they can't be.
We do learn that one of them is the son of the sheriff.
Exactly.
Next day, we get this information because Sam is talking to the sheriff, who isn't inclined to do anything.
Yeah, Sam says, look, I know who they are, I can ID them. And he tells them that it's Toad and Billy Joe. But this cuts no mustard with the racist cop, who plays it down as shenanigans and victim blames him for the cafe incident.
He then says he'll talk to his boy and the other one. But then Sam tells him it doesn't end with this, but he's told that's entirely up to him.
Well, it's a warning, it's a threat, isn't it? It's a veiled warning here. It's, you do what you need to do.
Stepping out of line, then there's not much I can do about it.
And the jailhouse door is slammed in his face, and we see another reflection. I think there's a few in this episode which worked well.
I think there's one that didn't work. I'm sure I've heard folk complaining about, or read folk complaining about it. I didn't notice it myself.
Complaining in...
That there's a reflection, but he looks like Sam.
Right. A blooper as opposed to...
Yeah, I didn't spot it myself.
No.
These two idiots, Billy Joe and Toad, then spot Sam drinking from the wrong, inverted commas, water fountain outside the police house, I suppose.
Yeah. And they decide to take the revenge sometime later.
He's gone too far, apparently.
Yep.
But they hold back. Yes, they're going to take their revenge at a future date or later time.
We go over to Melanie's house again, and we find them laughing together. So, like, at this point, the race is not an issue, it's forgotten. When they both get soaked as he tries to fix the broken pipe under the sink.
He says he needs to buy a new pipe, and she says it can wait until after tea, but she gets upset when he tries to take tea with her.
Yes, she makes tea for him every day, but he takes it in the kitchen.
Yeah, apparently.
He tries to persuade her by saying, well, it was your hospitality, you've made it with your hospitality, it's only polite of me to take it with you.
But she says that whites and coloured, as she puts it, can't eat at the same table.
She's getting exasperated because I think deep down she knows it's not really logical, so she resorts to
It also kind of seems that she would quite like to have tea with him.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I'm saying. She's conflicted here. She can't logically provide a reason. I think she resorts to saying, that's just the way things are.
Yeah, and when Sam suggests it's maybe time for change, she's rescued by the door.
Yeah, we can see her wrestle with this concept as the door is knocked. So Sam goes there, finds Nell, and tells her that he doesn't need a ride as he's going to drive Melanie's old Buick.
This is his current plan, is to stop her getting killed by taking her car away.
Nell knows something's up, something's not quite right, but she leaves as she's late for choir practice, and we head back to the living area where Melanie has had the chance to think about things and decides to voice her opinion.
Hogwash.
Beg pardon?
What you were talking is hogwash. Nobody's going to change the way things are.
But they will. Blacks are going to unite.
Blacks?
Blacks, that's what we'll be called instead of Negroes.
What in God's name's wrong with being called a Negro?
Maybe it's just a little too close to
I've never used that word, Jesse. Not to your face or behind your back. When you sat at Miss Patty's counter, I figured you were just getting old or somehow slipped your mind. But now I think you've gone just plumb crazy.
I've gone crazy. Miss Melanie, I'm not the one burning crosses in the front of people's homes.
We then cut to Nell driving alone towards her choir practice,
singing some gospel songs.
Toad and Billy Joe, however, are discussing the situation in their car.
Yeah, I think Toad is less of a massive racist than Billy Joe, because he's pleading with him not to kill Jesse. It's Jesse they're after, not Nell. But Billy Joe assures him that they're simply going to teach him a lesson.
Beat them back into line.
Yeah. As Nell passes, they pull out in front of her, causing her to swerve off the road and flip onto her roof. It's quite an impressive stunt.
Yeah. Toad wants to check on her, but Billy Joe pulls him back into the car and they drive off.
Yeah, he blames the N-word for her driving.
Back at the Trafford home, Sam is explaining about change that's going to come and how influential Melanie could be.
Yeah.
She's not willing to process this. She tells him the tea is cold and asks him to fix the leak.
So he sighs and tells her that he needs to get a pipe from town, but she insists on joining him on the trip. He tries to dissuade her, and when this doesn't work and she says he will drive herself, Sam grabs her and takes the key from her. So
she's a bit shaken when he puts his hands on her.
Yeah, I mean, leaving aside the racist issues. Anyone grabbing you and taking something from you would be a bit startling.
I thought they'd make more of this, but she lets it go.
Now, I thought here, if you are Sam and you don't want her to leave the house, he could quite easily break the car, undo the battery or something, and say, "Oh, it's not working."
Yeah, maybe. Anyhow, he doesn't. And as they're driving, we get a voiceover from Sam.
It's an inner monologue.
Yeah, saying he's got a knot in his stomach, even though they're driving away from the train tracks.
But just then, they spot the upturned car and rush over to find Nell with a severe laceration. We should say earlier on as well, there was quite a lot. We left her with quite a lot of blood.
She's been thrown from the car, yeah.
Yeah, she's unconscious. So Sam lifts her, puts her into the back of the car with Melanie.
Who doesn't complain, we should say.
No, she's distraught. And she complains about or she
notices a lot of blood. Yeah.
Yes. And urges Sam to hurry to the hospital. And we've got this nice, this urgent score as Melanie nurses her in the back seat. But what's the problem here?
There's 2 hospitals.
And where's Sam going?
The White Hospital.
The nearest one?
Yeah.
Which just happens to be the white one.
It's not indicated how much nearer it is. It seems to be a bit of a risk for him to take.
Yeah, I mean, it would depend. I suppose if it's maybe 10 minutes, that's quite a lot of time. If it was
And it's not made clear though.
Yeah.
Anyhow, they come to the level crossing, which causes Sam to look very carefully before driving across.
Yeah, I'm expecting the wheels to get trapped or something, or the car to stall, but no.
And at this point, he's insisting he's taking her to this white-only hospital.
Yeah, because Melanie says they won't see her, and he says the hell they won't.
Yeah, he's trying to, as if because he really wants it, everyone will fall into line with what he wants. Yeah,
which is entirely wrong, as we find out, if it wasn't for Melanie.
It's a white person's point of view, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, at the hospital, he runs out calling for a doctor, and the doctor does come out with the gurney, but says he won't treat Nell.
Yeah, they don't accept colours. Sam tries to insist, and we see a nurse. She scuttles off to call the sheriff. She's a horrible wee creature, her.
Oh, she's absolutely the worst.
And the doctor reminds him it's against the law. But at this point, it's Melanie's chance to shine. What happens?
She plays her trump card. She knows.
Oh, trump card's probably not the best.
not the trump card. She knows the doctor's parents. She knows his family, and
more importantly, she knows that he knows who she is.
Yes, and she urges him to treat the girl, which he ultimately agrees to do. She then tells Sam to wait outside and goes in with Nell. Yeah,
and the door once more is closed in his face, and we see the reflection.
Yeah, it's happened a few times.
Yeah, well, I think it's maybe
deliberate.
Yeah.
Al shows up at this point and tells Sam he should just get Melanie and leave, drive away from the rail.
They've got 23 minutes before the train will hit her. Now, you could just keep her there for 23 minutes. I think that's the next
I think that's the next plan. Al says he has a bad feeling, but Sam calls him paranoid. However, we see this evil nurse looking out the window, and the cops show up.
Yes, with their siren wailing, and she smugly points out Sam as the troublemaker. And the sheriff reminds him about his earlier warning, but seems to agree that Sam couldn't just let Nell die.
Indeed.
However,
he arrests him anyway. And Sam agrees to go with him so long as Ms. Melanie is kept inside for half an hour, which the nurse and the sheriff agree to.
I mean, that's... How are they going to do that?
They don't have any power to do that.
Because they already know that, okay, so the bigger issue here was that providing a service to a black person, and we know that Melanie simply says, you will do it. Now, that's a massive obstacle.
Yeah.
So if she tries to leave, after doing that, they're not going to restrain her physically.
No. And as we see, as Sam leaves with the sheriff, Melanie comes out to tell him that Nell's going to be fine, but the nurse has to explain that she had him arrested, which Melanie responds to by saying they'll need to arrest her too then.
Yeah, Al this whole time is very, very stressed. And again, I can understand why he would be. He does a lot of things that he knows he can't. He tries to interact.
Yes.
Although, there's something here that we can discuss.
It's out of desperation, I think. And despite his best efforts, she drives her own car off in pursuit of Sam.
Yeah, Al, I think, is hoping that Sam has got the keys, but no, he left them in the car, so she's able to...
And, the nurse doesn't make much of an effort to stop her.
And she drives right through a very, very bad CGI, Al.
I think that's a shot you see more than once of him getting the car driven through him, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not in this episode, but in credits and in other...
Yeah, this is the type of thing that doesn't date well in the show.
If you buy in, suspend your disbelief, it's fine.
Yeah.
Al then, I think we heard this at the opening clip, he gets Gushy to have Ziggy centre him on Ms. Melanie.
Yeah, so he's now in the car with her as she speaks to her late husband, wishing he could tell her what to do, and she derides the fact that Sam has been arrested for looking after his own.
Yeah, we get this great juxtaposition of the train heading towards the junction and the car heading towards the crossing, and you think, oh, what's going to stop her? She's not paying attention, nothing's going to save her.
Al is at his wit's end as Melanie. She hears the warning, but the train whistle, but she thinks it's this ringing in her head from earlier.
Yeah. Al, that's obviously why they had her hold her head earlier to get this. Al is screaming at her to pull over into the cemetery, God damn it, which she somehow hears and attributes to her dead husband.
Yes, so at the last second she pulls away and Al looks at her. So do we think it's, I mean, what
she's obviously heard him because she tells him he didn't need to swear.
Yeah.
But she thinks it's Charles.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get to that later. Or
it could just be when someone's near death, they can see Al and hear him. But she can't see him or hear him most of the time.
In the jail cell, a despondent Sam is not really interested in all of this as Al tells him what happened.
And indicates he might be able to reach younger women using this technique.
Yeah, I've wrote here that he talks about the creepy potential he sees. Yes.
We get an update from Ziggy, who has found out some information about Jesse.
What's that?
He's still alive in their time and aged over 100.
Yeah, and Sam, I don't think he isn't sure why he's not leaped yet. But anyway, at this point, the sheriff makes an appearance.
Well, maybe we're going to find out.
Jesse? This Melanie persuaded me to drop the charge against you. I talked to the hospital this morning.
How's Nell?
She's fine. They say she's going to be just fine. Don't you worry now. She told him how this accident happened. Well, seemed like a couple of boys, they sort of run her off the road. They didn't mean to hurt her none.
Well, what did they mean to do, Sheriff?
Well, I suppose maybe they thought you were in that car, Jesse. I mean, you have been acting mighty strange around here lately. Maybe they just wanted to...
To what, Sheriff? Maybe teach me a lesson?
Well, ain't nobody gonna be bothering you or any of yours again. I give you my word on that.
It's not good enough, Sheriff.
Just take it easy, Sam. It's going to happen.
Damn it, Jesse. Now, I'm telling you, them boys are sorry.
4 months from today,
What boy, Sheriff?
Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King are
That's
going to
it, all I'm
start the
saying.
Montgomery boycotts.
Now, you better just get on out of here, Jesse, before I change my mind. Go on.
You're gonna have to change your mind about a lot of things, Sheriff.
After Sam leaves, Al starts singing We Shall Overcome in a nice piece of cultural appropriation.
Also, I wonder Al is shown here to be liberal and progressive, but I wonder what his views and opinions are on the women's liberation, which is yet to come.
Well, we'll find out maybe.
Sam exits to find Melanie and an unhappy Clayton waiting on him.
Yes, Clayton says if it was up to him, Jesse would still be locked up, but he's quickly told by his mother that it's not up to him.
Yeah, not just that, but he says he's using Melanie.
Yes, but she sends him away and says her relationship with Mr. Tyler is her business.
She also finds out and is happy to hear that Nell is fine and says that she was glad to help at the hospital. But Sam is shocked to hear that they moved her last night.
Yeah, she's moved, as Melanie says, back with her own people.
She said that earlier on about looking after his own, and that's still, whilst you might think that you're being polite or it's the correct thing to say, you're still being divisive. It's your people and our people.
Yeah, but we saw Sam holds that opinion at the start as well.
Yeah.
Anyhow, she says that she knows the world isn't just and he can go and try to change it, or he can keep working for her and never discuss it again.
Yes, wasn't great, that ultimatum.
No. But then she asks him to go into the diner and pick up her lunch in a sort of a bookend.
Yeah, he enters Miss Patty's and it falls silent once more.
Yeah, we see the sheriff sitting with, I think, Clayton and Toad and Billy Joe.
Yeah, they're waiting to see what's going to happen, what Jesse or Sam is going to do. And seem relieved when he says he's They are just to pick up the lunch and turns to leave.
Yes, but just then,
Melanie enters.
she says she's decided to eat here before inviting Sam to eat with her, which riles up Billy Joe quite significantly.
Yeah, he stands up as if he's about to challenge them, but the sheriff puts a hand on his shoulder, pulls him back down, and when Sam takes his seat, he eventually leaps.
Well, there's a nice shot where he looks in the mirror and sees the two of them together.
Side by side, yeah.
And he arrives in a car race as a spotty kid.
Yes, he is under a bridge, donning a pair of sunglasses, a cigarette, and a face full of teenage zits.
Is this like something out of Greece?
Well, yeah, I thought that's when it would be, but it actually tells us it's 1961. So, yeah.
Okay.
And is this when we get the first oh boy leap? Or
Well, that's in my trivia. Yes, it's the first post-leap oh boy. He said oh boy in the opening episode, or I think Genesis Part 2.
I never mentioned a few weeks ago when we had Buddy Holly. Oh boy was a famous Buddy Holly song.
Oh, there you go. One of the things that we get told when we do podcasts about older shows, especially Fawlty Towers, is that we shouldn't be critical of things that are of their time. So do you think Sam was wrong not to try harder to fit in as Jesse and just go along with things?
It depends.
You should just accept that's how things were then.
He knows he's only there for a short time, and yeah, I think as we've discussed, you could be leaving Jesse in a really dangerous position. This guy's got to live the rest of his life there.
Yeah, so especially things with the cafe at the start, okay, didn't know what was going on, but then with the water fountain, that was quite clearly signposted. He deliberately chose the one he wasn't supposed to use.
Yeah, I think there are ways of doing it. You can implant ideas and concepts if you've got enough time, but you're only there for a day. It's a hard question, isn't it? How much you want to do? You think you're being safe, being a white man who's about to leap, thinking, I'll do whatever I want here. But
there's consequences.
There's consequences for the person who comes back in, has got to live there. So, I think he could have made his point without riling up the racists who are so stupid and thick that they're resorting to potentially murdering people. So you've caused a bit of a problem. There are ways and means of doing things. I think you have to be smarter with it, and I think that's what did happen. Martin Luther King didn't just get about there causing all sorts of trouble. He knew that wasn't the way to.
Sometimes he did.
Yes, but trouble. He caused a lot of trouble, yes, but good trouble. But what I'm saying is, you don't just get around there and agitate people for the sake of it. There has to be a strategy. There has to be an end game. You have to do it smartly, and that's what the civil rights movement did, and what Sam didn't do here. He just tried to break the conventions and thought, well, if I break the conventions, then everyone will see I'm right and it will change. But of course it won't. You can't do it that way. You can't. Idiots and doughballs aren't going to just accept that.
Yeah, and we know from history that these idiots and doughballs didn't go away anywhere. They just got quiet for a while. Now they're making a comeback.
Yeah, of course they are.
Especially with this great replacement theory that's gaining a lot of traction in America.
Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff.
Yep. Well, there's a few people one person in particular that you can blame for the incitement of a lot of this stuff.
Well, I know, but I think it was always there.
Of course it was always there, but it's been inflamed. Someone played the trump card.
Well, what did you make of Al speaking to Melanie? Or more importantly, Melanie hearing Al?
Yeah, I've got this down here as one of the things we learned, that apparently Al can be heard by old women when he's angry and shouts. And
they're about to die if they don't listen to him.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm not sure, if I like that or not. Because what it does, now there has to be a consistency, doesn't there? The rest of the shows, if Al can make himself heard, you can't just ignore it from now on.
Overall, then, do you think Sam has made things better or worse for Jesse now that he comes back into this life?
Well, we know that Al says that's where the civil rights movement started anyway. So it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Jesse's now just been put. Now, who knows? He's been put in the firing line. He's now a target. Yeah. There already has been attempted murders on him, and his family have been terrorised. I can't see his life being any easier when he comes back.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
And I've said before, Jesse doesn't know what's going on. He's just got to get placed back in there. I sat at a counter. Are you kidding me?
So did you think it was a good episode then, overall?
So the thing we have to acknowledge is that its heart was in the right place, and it had good intentions, and it was trying to call out the issues of the issues from that period. But this is now so dated because we know that these issues haven't been resolved, and they never went away.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're looking back going, do you remember when
there probably was a period in the 90s when people thought things were irrevocably heading in the right direction.
Really, when Rodney King was getting battered by cops?
Well, I don't know. I just mean like,
the LA
I
riot.
don't mean everyone thought it, but I think there was a consensus that we've got this melting pot now. America's going to be, although we haven't solved everything completely, we're going to be okay. We're going in the right direction.
Well, I think you can obviously say that, in terms of the statutes and the actual rights that people had, they'd improved, but the practical usage of rights, I mean, I don't know.
I think a lot of people see rights granted to others as something being taken from them.
Yeah.
Because they're so used to being in a privileged position, or their group being in a privileged position, that they see things like, I mean, equality then feels like they're being targeted, or they're being stigmatized themselves, or they're being in some way marginalized, when it's not really the case. It's just, it feels like that because they're so used to being in the privileged position.
Well, there's a famous quote, isn't it? It says that when you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Yeah.
And that's the case. Yeah. So yeah, no, end of the day, it was an enjoyable episode. It did highlight a lot of issues, and I think it was probably quite brave for the time of the TV. You wouldn't, a lot of the language, if you're writing that today, we say brave, we're still thinking that it was acceptable for family entertainment is this to be using these terms. It did have the white people saving the white saviour syndrome.
Yeah.
So yeah, heart was in the right place. That's all I'll say.
It tried.
Let's
finish on that.
Yeah. Some trivia. It
was originally airing on the 3rd of May 1989. I think that's a wee gap from the previous episode. Directed by Michael Vajar. This was his only Quantum Leap episode, but he has directed shows like Cagney and Lacey, Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Enterprise, and Babylon 5. He was actually trusted with some of the more important Deep Space Nine episodes towards the end of its run. He was one of the go-to directors for that time. His last directorial work for the screen was in 2005. He's now 79.
Yep.
In terms of writing, it was again the co-producer Deborah Pratt who was behind this one.
It's probably worth mentioning this week that Deborah Pratt is black.
Yeah, it makes sense if you're telling a story like this to perhaps look to someone who's got some level of insight into the situation, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible decision. I mean, during the discussion here, we've been critical of some aspects of it, and I think you have to accept that she is writing within the constraints of the show and the characters that already have been developed. So
what the studio's going to allow them to do with the show.
Oh, precisely.
And to some extent, perhaps it's deliberate that she's written it in this way to show Sam as being an imperfect avatar, as it were, for this situation.
Yeah, I don't think you can be critical of her writing.
No. And if you want to hear more about her background, we covered her in the podcast for Star-Crossed, which was episode 3.
We did.
Miss Melanie was played by Susan French. This was her only Quantum Leap appearance. Her screen career didn't begin until she was in her 50s, and she portrayed unnamed older women in a number of films, including Exiled in America, Flatliners, and Jaws 2. She also appeared in series like Little House on the Prairie, Cagney and Lacey, Star Trek The Next Generation, and Grace Under Fire. And she died in 2003 when she was 91.
There are a few people like that, and they give me hope. I'll still make it as a Hollywood star, or at least a Hollywood character actor at some point in the future. Still time. I'm probably
waiting for your big break.
I'm probably past being a professional football player now.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, or a boxer. So yeah, let's do that.
Royce D Applegate played Sheriff Blunt. This was the first of his 2 Quantum Leap appearances. He's a prolific actor. He's appeared in movies like Dr. Dolittle with Eddie Murphy, Under Siege 2, one of your favourites.
Under Siege 1 was good for a couple of reasons.
And
as a kid.
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? As well as series like TJ Hooker, Twin Peaks, and a lot of Sequest DSV, before his untimely death at the age of 63 on New Year's Day 2003 in a house fire.
Unfortunate.
Reminds you of one other star, Jack Cassidy, was the one we talked about in Columbo quite a lot here, a house fire.
He certainly did. Smoking in bed.
Michael D. Roberts played Willis, the son of Jesse.
What you talking about?
This was the first of his 2 appearances in the show. He's another prolific actor. He was in movies like A Star Is Born, the more recent version, Hostage and Rain Man, as well as television shows like Seinfeld and Friends. He's now 74 years old. He seems to still be performing. Clayton, the son of Melanie, was played by James Ingersoll. This was his only Quantum Leap appearance, but he also appeared in series like Star Trek Enterprise, Dexter, and one episode of Columbo.
Okay.
Do you remember him?
No.
He was John in Columbo Goes to College.
Okay.
That makes him a connection for this week. He's also in films like Olympus Has Fallen and Back to School. He's now 74.
Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield.
Kimberly Bailey played Nell Tyler. This was her only Quantum Leap appearance. She also appeared in shows like Beverly Hills 90210 and Weird Science, and she voiced a sheep in the movie Babe. But she's more prolific with behind-the-scenes ADR and loop work for films like Justice League, The Great Gatsby, and The Incredibles 2. Michael Kruger played Billy Joe. This was his only Quantum Leap appearance, which is not that big a surprise as he only has 6 acting credits to his name, including appearances on Dallas, Sons of Thunder, and one episode of Sledgehammer.
Oh, did he?
So he was in Sledge in Toyland, but his character didn't even have a name.
If you want to listen to a couple of guys chat about Sledgehammer, then you can look up the
Sledgecast, yeah sledgehammerpodcast.com.
It's not on YouTube yet, but you'll get it on
will be
your
eventually.
podcast apps. Yeah.
Bits of trivia, as you mentioned, the Back to the Future town square is used. I think it comes up in future episodes as well.
And Knight Rider.
There's also a scene in this episode that used the Hazard Company square set from Dukes of Hazzard. You talked about the first black student at Alabama. It was a fictional name. The real first one was Vivian Malone Jones, along with James Hood. I think that was a big story in Alabama back in the day, obviously. Melanie, obviously the first human character other than Sam who can hear Al. Well, the animals have reacted to him previously. This is, as you said, the first episode with the post-leap oh boy, which becomes iconic. And I think we should maybe keep Jesse in mind because he might show up again in the future. Al makes a reference in the episode to the Twilight Zone, which is a bit meta because Dean Stockwell was in it twice. And in terms of things we learned, you talked briefly earlier, obviously we learned Al involved in the civil rights movement can apparently speak to other people in certain circumstances. Sam still can't help putting his own feelings ahead of everything else, and he's a bit of a racist.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Next week we have Kamikaze Kid with a C, where Sam has to help save a woman from an abusive relationship. So we will see you in 1961.
Until then,
cheerio.
bye bye.